The blood is still warm on the marble. Livia Marcella is 26 years old, and she can feel it soaking through the silk of her stola where she kneels beside her husband's body, can smell the copper iron stench mixing with the perfume she had applied that morning for a dinner that will never happen, can hear through the walls of the imperial bedchamber the sound of hobnailed boots, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, moving through the palace corridors with a purpose that makes her stomach clench with understanding. She was, until 17 minutes ago, Augusta Empress of Rome, wife of Gaius Aurelius Maximus, the most powerful woman in the known world. She commanded a household of 3,000. She received ambassadors from Parthia and petitions from senators. She wore purple that only the imperial family was permitted to wear, ate from gold plates, slept on silks imported from the far edges of the trade routes. Now she kneels in her husband's blood while the men who killed him secure the palace, and she understands with terrible clarity that the purple she wears has become a target rather than a protection. The door to the bedchamber opens. A man enters tall, perhaps 45, wearing the distinctive armor of the Praetorian Guard but with the red cloak that marks him as prefect. His face is familiar. She has seen it at state functions, at the morning salutations where her husband received his officers, at the dinners where military matters were discussed over wine and roasted peacock. His name is Lucius Cassius Nerva, and until 17 minutes ago, he was sworn to protect her husband's life with his own. Now he looks at her with an expression she cannot read, not triumph, not cruelty, but something colder, assessment. The calculation of a man determining what to do with a piece of the old regime that has suddenly become his to dispose of. Augusta, he says. The title sounds strange in his mouth, as if he is testing whether it still applies. My condolences on your husband's sudden illness. Illness. She looks at the body beside her, the stab wounds in the chest and abdomen, the defensive cuts on her husband's hands where he had tried to ward off the blades, the blood that has pooled across half the floor. Is that what we're calling it? That is what the Senate will be told. The emperor succumbed to a fever that struck suddenly and proved resistant to the physician's efforts. His death was peaceful. He named Titus Flavius Severus as his successor with his final breath. My husband hated Severus. He was planning to have him prosecuted for treason, which is why it was necessary to act before those plans matured. Nerva steps closer, his boots leaving prints in the blood. Severus is 3 days' march from Rome with the Pannonian legions. He will arrive to find the city peaceful, the succession orderly, the transfer of power complete. He will be grateful to those who arranged this transition. And me? She forces her voice to remain steady. What is your plan for the emperor's widow? Nerva smiles. It is not a pleasant expression. That depends on several factors. How cooperative you are, how valuable you prove to be, how much trouble you cause during the interregnum. The period between your husband's death and Severus's assumption of power, 2 hours, perhaps slightly more depending on the speed of his march. During that time, the Praetorian Guard controls Rome. We control the palace. We control everything that happens within these walls. The implication settles into her chest like a cold weight. 72 hours. 3 days, during which the men who murdered her husband will have unlimited access to the imperial household, to the women who live within it, to her. What do you want? She asks. At the moment, information. The emperor kept records lists of those he suspected, evidence he had gathered, plans he had made. These records would be inconvenient if they fell into the wrong hands. I need to know where they are. And if I tell you, then you demonstrate cooperation. Cooperation is rewarded. And if I don't? Nerva's expression does not change, but something shifts in his eyes. Then you demonstrate the opposite, and the Guard has traditional methods for dealing with the households of fallen emperors, methods that your predecessors' wives experienced, methods that I am certain you would prefer to avoid. He lets the threat hang in the air, lets her imagination supply the details that his words do not specify. "I need time to think," she says. "You have until midnight. After that, I will assume you have chosen non-cooperation, and I will proceed accordingly." He turns toward the door, then pauses. "One more thing. Your stepdaughter is being brought to the Guard's quarters for questioning, and the 3 women of your husband's private household. I thought you should know that their treatment will depend on the same factors that determine yours: cooperation or its absence." He leaves. She hears the door lock behind him, hears the guards taking up position in the corridor, hears the sounds of the palace being systematically secured by men whose loyalty has shifted to a new master. She has until midnight, perhaps 8 hours. 8 hours to find a way to survive what is coming. What you are about to learn has been deliberately excluded from the histories that record Rome's imperial successions. The historians who documented the deaths of emperors focused on political factors: who gained power, who lost it, which factions rose, and which fell. They recorded the fates of male relatives with precision: executed, exiled, permitted to live in obscurity. They noted the disposition of property, the redistribution of titles, the realignment of the senatorial class. But the fates of imperial women during the interregnum, the gap between one emperor's death and another's assumption of power, were rarely specified. A widow might be mentioned as having retired from public life or entered private existence, without detail about what that transition actually involved. The women of the imperial household simply disappeared from the record. Their experiences during the dangerous hours after their protector's death left to imagination. Tonight you will learn what actually happened during those hours. You will learn about the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect the emperor, and what they did when their oaths became void. You will learn about the interregnum tradition, the understanding, never written but universally acknowledged, that the Guard had certain privileges during the transition period. You will learn about Livia Marcella, whose husband's assassination left her at the mercy of the men who killed him. You will learn what Prefect Nerva demanded, what she was willing to sacrifice to survive, and what happened to the other women of the imperial household during the 72 hours before the new emperor arrived. Subscribe if you want to understand what really happened behind palace walls during Rome's most dangerous transitions. Comment below telling me where you are watching from, because the next 8 hours of Livia's life will determine whether she survives, and I am going to tell you exactly what she faced and what she did. But before I describe the choices she made and the horrors she witnessed, I need to take you back. I need to explain why the Praetorian Guard had the power they did, how the interregnum tradition developed, and what it meant to be an imperial woman when the emperor died. Because you cannot understand what Livia faced without understanding the system that made her vulnerability inevitable. The Praetorian Guard was Rome's most powerful military force, and also its most dangerous. Originally established by Augustus as the emperor's personal bodyguard, the Guard had evolved over generations into something far more complex than a simple protective force. 9 cohorts of the finest soldiers in the empire, stationed in Rome itself, while other legions were posted to distant frontiers. The Praetorians were simultaneously the emperor's greatest protection and his greatest threat. They protected him from assassination, and they also carried it out when circumstances warranted. They ensured the stability of his reign, and they destabilized it when a new patron offered better rewards. They swore oaths of absolute loyalty, and they broke those oaths whenever breaking them proved more profitable than keeping them. By the time of Livia's husband's reign, the Praetorian Guard had killed more emperors than any foreign enemy. Caligula, Galba, Pertinax, Elagabalus. The list of emperors who had died at their sworn protectors' hands was long and instructive. Every emperor knew that the men guarding his bedchamber might become his executioners if the political winds shifted. But the guard's power extended beyond assassination. During the interregnum, the period between an emperor's death and his successor's secure assumption of power, the Praetorians controlled Rome absolutely. No other military force was permitted within the city's sacred boundary. The Senate had no soldiers to enforce its decrees. The urban cohorts, Rome's police force, were subordinate to the Praetorian prefect. For those critical hours or days, the guard was Rome's only effective authority. This created a tradition that the historians rarely discussed directly. During the interregnum, the guard expected certain considerations. The imperial treasury would provide a substantial donative, a payment for the soldiers' support of the succession. The new emperor would confirm the prefect's position or negotiate his honorable retirement.